Today I'm going to be taking a look at these terrain pieces designed by Hobgoblin 3D that you can download the STL files of and print yourself. Hobgoblin 3D were nice enough to send me these pieces to demo and review, but they did not in any way pay me to make a review, so I'm just showing them to you because I think they're cool, and I want to say thanks to them for sending them my way. Now, what is it that they sell? They design and sell STL files that you can download and print on your own 3D printer. They do not print and sell the actual pieces. You can't just order these and get them mailed to you. You got to download the file and print them yourself. But I'm guessing a lot of you guys are like me and don't own a 3D printer and probably won't own one anytime soon. They are getting a lot more reasonable in their price, but they are still a pretty hefty investment, especially for those of us in a hobby kind of centered around making cool stuff for as cheap as possible. So the initial investment of a 3D printer is not something all of us can do. I know a lot of you out there, when you see 3D printed terrain stuff for sale, the files, you think, well, that's useless. I don't have a printer. What am I going to do? So after we take a close look at these and I show you the sculpts on them, stay tuned, because at the end, I'm going to show you a way that without owning a 3D printer, you can still utilize their service and get these things printed out for a very reasonable price. Let's go over to the table and take a closer look. All right, guys, here they are close up. And as you can tell, they look really nice. They're really excellent sculpts and designs. I would be happy to put any of them on my table. But this begs the question, how do I feel about 3D printed terrain in general? Honestly, I think it's cool. I think that having more tools and options in your arsenal is always a positive thing, and no crafter should ever be threatened by the concept of 3D printed terrain. The only issue I have with it is the cost of entry. There is a barrier for a lot of people, including myself, that they just can't cross because they can't justify the cost of a 3D printer. It's a bit of a pay-to-play thing, which is counter to the crafting mentality we all have, and the thing that makes our hobby great, which is get some very cheap material, maybe even some garbage, and make something awesome looking. So that's the only thing I don't like about it, is the cost. But like I'll mention at the end of the video, there is a way to get 3D printed terrain without having to buy a printer yourself. For me, if I had a 3D printer, would it take over from crafting? And I don't think it would, because there's a lot of stuff that I think looks much better handcrafted and sculpted, things that are at a larger scale. Like the buildings you've seen me make, I don't think I'd ever want to 3D print one of those. I don't know what the costs are of 3D printing something that large, but I think at that point, it becomes less cost effective than just little stuff like this. And that's the kind of stuff where I think the artistry of handcrafted stuff makes sense. However, handcrafted stuff has its limitation, and usually that limitation comes in the form of size and small detail. Some of these items I would, and have built myself out of basically nothing, out of styrofoam. But some of these items I would never be able to sculpt nearly this well. So if I had a 3D printer, I would be using it for those types of items that you just can't make that well small, or I would be using it to make small individual elements as a part of a bigger crafting project. So anyways, enough about that. It's a hot topic. I'm sure some people will start an argument in the comments about 3D printing, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. Comments help the videos get to the top of the YouTube feed. So go nuts, guys. Argue away. But anyways, let's take a closer look at some of this stuff. So as you can see, there are two items here that I have already painted because I wanted to see how they took paint and how they actually looked with some paint on it. I would say that painted, these things really stand up. they look really good. So here's this little brazier. I did a pretty quick paint job, just, did it up quickly last night. And I'm not an expert miniature painter, but even with just acrylic craft paint and a little, not very much time, this thing would look awesome on any table. Now, the interesting thing is that I did not prime it with any kind of proper primer or spray paint. I took cheap acrylic craft paint, painted it black, and it adhered really well and it covered really well. I was very surprised. Obviously, that's probably not the ideal way to do it. You would want to probably prime it properly, but if you don't, it can still turn out pretty cool. So that's that. I really like this. This is the kind of thing I could never build. I could build a brazier, but I could not get tiny skulls like this into it. There's just no way. Like, even if I managed to get tiny beads and put them on, I don't think they would sit as nice. And at that point, if you're using beads, that's a sculpt by someone else anyway, so it's no different fundamentally than a 3D print. So anyway, that's that. The second thing was this food sack of potatoes and whatnot. And now, keep in mind that you can't really judge the quality of the print because everyone can print them at different quality levels depending on how much time they want to take doing it. This is just what they printed them at for their demos. So I'm going to put the specs on the screen right now so you guys can see what they printed them at just for your frame of reference. But anyway, one thing about 3D printed stuff, whenever I see it, is that you get these, print lines, all the different levels. And sometimes I think that absolutely ruins it. And I just hate it the way it looks often. Now, you can print things at higher quality to avoid that, blah, blah, blah. But what I actually found that I was most impressed with Hobgoblin sculpts is that with all these lines showing up, I get the feeling that they put some effort into keeping that in mind, that, it would actually, keeping it in mind that they would have those lines, and they used it to work well within the piece. Like this, it adds texture and adds to the burlap sack. And, same with the brazier, like those lines don't look bad at all. They, work into the metal. In a chest, it works into the wood grain and you don't even notice it. It seems like they've avoided designs or sculpts where that would not look very good. So I appreciate that. And even stuff like this, you could probably make something like this yourself out of Sculpey or whatever. But if I was to make this, it would come close, but it wouldn't have these little details of like the individual vegetables like bulging out of the sack. I think that's great, and that's what really makes a piece like this shine. So another pile, you got this pile here of kind of artifacty treasure stuff. Again, using those print lines to their advantage. I got this wicker kind of basket thing, and it works really well. Detail's really nice on this. Looks like it would be fun to paint. Here you have another pile of gear. This one looks like it has, I guess like a mortar and pestle, some, kind of vegetables in a bowl, a little adventurer's pack that, again, see the 3D print lines, I think, look like part of the fabric, and that's really nice. You also have here a little pedestal that you could place whatever you want on. You got skulls on it that are very small and still have a nice amount of detail on them. Here you have this sweet coffin that's mixed wood and metal. I really like the way this looks, and what's neat is that it actually opens up, so you could put stuff inside it if you want, or you could just glue it shut and make it a static piece. Here, this is actually, see, this is where I wish I had a 3D printer, is to pump out stuff like this. Because a barrel, as simple as it is an incredibly difficult thing to sculpt yourself and sculpt well in any kind of mass quantity. And it's something that I've avoided, and I just don't have barrels in my game, which is a shame because, you know, they're a classic on the table. But this, I think this is a perfect use for 3D terrain. And this barrel looks simple and good, and I would like to have more of them, and I will get to that at the end of the video. Here you have this really fancy, ornate looking, I shouldn't say fancy, but detailed looking table. I have a set of tables that I made out of styrofoam that I love, and I think they look great, but I think this will sit nicely with them as a, you know, kind of showpiece table. I really love the ironwork, the variation in the wood planking, and the little details around the leg. I think around the legs, that will look awesome on anybody's table. Now here we got a chest. This is one of those things, I've made my own chests that I really like, and I could get away without having them printed. But, you know, at this scale, this thing looks excellent. It's printed in 2 pieces. The top comes off and the inside is full of treasure, which is a nice touch. Although when things open like that, I don't know how much gameplay use they actually get. I'm not going to be opening a chest every time you're like, look, there's treasure in there. That's what the narration of the game is for. But anyway, it's still a cool thing to have and a nice thing to show people when they're looking at your shelves full of weirdo stuff. And then this is probably my favorite piece that they sent me, this massive ornate chest. Like, this is something that when it's on the table, your players are going to want to go for it, and they're going to want to open it, and they will take all sorts of risks to do so. This thing is amazing looking. I love the little eagle heads on it and the wings, and just this design on it, the lock, it even has a keyhole. It's awesome. But the best thing is this. It's not only does it open, but it's hinged, and it is full of treasure, swords, coins, shields, all sorts of stuff. And this lid is so cool. It actually like locks in stages, so you can leave it, you want to really entice your players and just like leave it open a crack so they can see. You can. So this is printed in, multiple parts and then is assembled, and it is awesome. So that is that. I am looking forward to painting the rest of these things and putting them on my table. This is going to see gameplay next session for sure. That's why I painted that one first. So that's that. Now let me tell you how you can get some of these printed without a 3D printer. Okay, so you've seen them, they look cool, you want to print some yourself, but you don't have a printer. What do you do? Well, that's the same boat I'm in. So I went looking. I know a lot of people have mentioned using 3D printers at their local library or different creative spaces in the city that have them available for rent. That's a possibility. Not every city has a library, and it might not be an option, but honestly, just do what I did. Go on to the interwebs, Google in your city name, 3D printing. And unless you live in the total boonies, I'm going to guess that something comes up. And that's what I did. I Googled Winnipeg 3D printing, and I found a few places that are printing services, but look to be more focused on larger scale stuff for manufacturing. But I came across a really cool website called 3dhubs.com. And basically what it is it's Uber, but for 3D printing. It's people who own a 3D printer themselves, and they list themselves on the website and offer their services to print stuff for you, which is pretty smart because that's a way they can help offset the cost of buying one themselves. So I was on 3dhubs.com looking at my city, and there was several people listed who offered their services, and they have their kind of base price listed, and you can upload an STL file and it will actually analyze it and give you a direct quote on the price. So I looked, and you know what? There was a guy named Alex. It shows you the map of where they're located, and he lives like 6 blocks away from me. So I wanted to test out the barrel because I figured it was a simple way to start. Uploaded the file, and he did a test print and sent me a photo of what it would look like, and not bad. So what is it actually gonna cost? Well, there's an initial setup fee that's like $4, and every barrel after that is $1. So I'm gonna be able to print a dozen barrels for about 16 bucks, you know? And like I said, there's a $4 initial setup fee. So if I want to print a bunch of stuff, it's not that expensive if you're doing things in bulk. Now, $1 to print this barrel is a lot more expensive than what it actually costs someone with the printer to do it themselves. Hobgoblin actually sent with this package some information on print times, and using the printer they had and the material they had, this barrel costs about 4 cents to print. And that's great if you own a printer, but if you don't, and you want to make use of some cool designs you find online, I mean, you know, a couple dollars for one of these is totally worth it. I mean, that's what you would pay if it was a, you know, like a Reaper Bones barrel. It's going to cost you a few bucks. So that is an option if you don't have your own printer. If you do have a printer, I highly encourage downloading their files, printing a couple out. They look really good. So thanks again to Hobgoblin 3D for sending these over. I'm looking forward to using them in my game. As usual, hit that like button, drop a comment, hit subscribe. Peace.